Hello and welcome back to Reunited States, podcast where we aim to re-inject civil discourse back into our everyday lives about the topics that are much too spicy for the dining room table. From Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And from Manchester, New Hampshire, I am Jesse Saywell.
And we are less than a week away now from Election Day, November 2nd. I'm sure a lot of us are concerned. I'm sure a lot of others are excited for various reasons. But we want to take the podcast episode today to discuss what we feel is going to happen come Election Day and beyond, and finally end on some predictions over how it's going to go down.
I think I share the anxieties of a lot of people right now about the election. This is an anxiety-inducing time. I was fortunate enough, I saw Jon Stewart stand up this weekend, and one of the first questions he asked the audience was just, how are your sphincters doing? Which I think is an indication of kind of how anxious many of us are about the future of the country, the future of the world, and of course, a lot of that hinges on the results of this election. And I have people, not just in the United States, but I have friends from around the world, literally around the world, reaching out to me, and they want to know what is going to happen. And I wish I knew, because none of us know. And anybody that tells you definitively, oh, they know that there's no chance that so-and-so wins, unless they're saying Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There's no chance that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Jill Stein or Cornel West, they're not winning. Okay, there are two options, but if...
Or Vermin Supreme.
Any of them, there are two options in terms of who will win the presidential election. We know who they are, but anyone that tells you that definitively their candidate is the only one that can win, they are wrong. Because they do not know. They do not have powers that we do not have.
They don't have mysterious secret polls.
No.
Or know anything happening behind closed doors. They don't.
No.
All we have are predictions. All we have are gut feelings.
Yes.
And that's an important thing to take away from a lot of what we're going to be hearing in the media.
Yes.
On the left and the right.
Yes.
Is that a lot of people will think that this is why it's a landslide for enter candidate here. And the truth is, they don't know. All they have is their own gut feeling. And it's not bad. It's not bad to talk about what you feel is going to happen. But it is important that you do not take it as gospel.
There is data, as you know, I'm a data person, I'm a polls guy. There is data to follow that gives us a sense of where the race is. But that data is not absolute. The only thing that is absolute are the vote counts when they are tallied. No matter what...
Unless they're Trump, then maybe that's not
exactly.
absolute, right?
No matter what certain candidates want you to think, this will be a free and fair election that will decide who is going to be the next president of the United States. But I do want to at least take a quick moment here to talk about what has gone on just in the last couple of days. Starting with the Trump Madison Square Garden rally. For those who haven't paid much attention to this, you only saw a little bit of it, this was really disturbing. To be honest with you, I mean, this felt like, and when we talk about fascism, that word gets thrown out a lot, but I do think it's important to bring it up, because this felt like watching a fascist rally, and having been to Munich, having studied a lot about what the Nazi Party looked like in the lead up to their rise to power, it's eerily similar, and some of the really, really divisive rhetoric that was spewed, and the most famous thing that was spewed, even more than some of what Tucker Carlson said, which was really heinous. I mean, they called Kamala Harris essentially a prostitute. I mean, this is really disgusting stuff. But you had a comedian, a Trump-loving comedian, was one of the warm-up acts for Trump at Madison Square Garden, who said that there is a pile of floating garbage in the Atlantic Ocean right now, and it's called Puerto Rico. And that's a really despicable, disgusting thing to say about an island that is full of American citizens. Again, American citizens. Puerto Ricans are citizens of the United States. And this continued otherism of them that has gone on dating back to when Trump was in office, because he didn't like that he had to give aid money to Puerto Rico when there was a hurricane, and then he came down and he tossed the paper towels to the crowd like, the hero that he is. But this was really despicable. In the aftermath of that, of course, there is a lot of controversy, and there's a lot of discussion about, will this impact Puerto Rican voters, many of whom live in the swing state of Pennsylvania, and I'll go into why Pennsylvania is the most critical state in the election shortly. So that was the narrative for all of about 3 days before Joe Biden, who, yes, still is president of the United States, if you had forgotten, Joe Biden had to go on a Zoom call and respond. And in his response, which was ineloquent because he cannot speak, he cannot communicate. This is the same thing as the debate. He has the arguments, but he cannot make them coherently. He goes off talking about that specific segment, calling Puerto Rico garbage, and he says, essentially, the only garbage I saw was his supporters. Now, what he was trying to say, it seems, what he was trying to say is the people who were there spewing this racist rhetoric. And he has tried to clean it up since then. But it was such a moronic thing to say, and it's exasperating. And I know the Harris team is tired of it, because that's what I hear already from people who are involved in the campaign. I'm hearing that they are absolutely livid about this, because there she is, she makes a speech the other night about, uniting America, about giving a vision for America. She makes the speech on the National Mall, roughly on the spot where Trump incited that mob to go to the Capitol on January 6th. And she makes a speech about uniting and bringing back a sense of unity and fighting back against division. Meanwhile, Biden is in the White House, and he is undermining that with a stupid comment that he didn't need to make, that he didn't need to say, and thrusting himself back into the national dialogue at a time when we desperately, as Democrats, need this unpopular president to be out of the spotlight. It was immensely frustrating, and I had to at least address it, because we talk about reuniting states here. It's obviously the title, Reunited States. You can't do that if your rhetoric could potentially be viewed as talking down to the people, and especially on the left. I know that it's not a fair standard. Trump can literally call people the enemy within. That's what he calls liberals in this country. He has talked about, jailing them, prosecuting them. It's horrible. And it's disgusting. And what Biden said is nowhere near that. But we're held to a different standard, and we hold ourselves to a different standard. And politically, it is a huge problem. And I believe it just brings to everyone's mind, of course, Hillary Clinton's comments in 2016, in which she called half of Trump's supporters a basket of deplorables. That was viewed by many as a vindication of their belief that the liberal elites look down on working class people and look down upon rural people, people from conservative communities. I went to the gym today. It was on literally every single television was discussing Biden's comments and the White House having to walk it back. That was deeply disturbing to me. So I did at least want to bring that up before we get started.
Comments like that, made on the right, made on the left, do not help. It does not help the candidate to make those comments. It doesn't help America to hear those comments. One of two things happens when you have that, right? You have one side that hears that and says, yeah, those are all deplorables. Yeah, those are all garbage. Or, yeah, they're all childless cat ladies. Yeah, they're all insane. They're all enemies from within. And then the side that receives these comments wears it on a t-shirt. Do you remember all the deplorables memorabilia that happened immediately after that?
Yep.
Proud deplorable.
Yep.
Proud MAGA.
Yeah.
I guarantee you we're going to have something
it's a great
that's
point.
going to say proud garbage now. Again, it vindicates them.
Yeah.
It makes them want to own that. Proud childless cat ladies. I mean, we call ourselves that in the podcast.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, but it does goes to show that people wear that as a badge of honor. And while, yes, that's a way of coping with, nasty comments like that, it doesn't make it right. Yes, you should wear it on your sleeve. Sure. That is an effective way of dealing with nasty comments, regardless of who you are, regardless of who makes the comments.
Yeah.
But it should also be an indicator to the campaigns, to candidates, saying hey, it doesn't work. It just pisses people off. Stop doing it.
It's a great point, and you're absolutely right. And again, there is an unfair double standard that exists between the left and the right regarding this, because Trump demeans people and talks down to people and talks about his political opponents and all of this like they are not human, and he does that all the time. And so, in no way do I mean to say that what Biden said is the same, but it is deeply politically problematic. It was, to me, a gut punch because it entirely reset the national news cycle. All of a sudden, we're talking about what Joe Biden said instead of what we should be talking about, which was a bunch of really horrible fascist language over the weekend. And yes, some of that is the news media, some of that's just the way that things go, and they deserve their own fair share of criticism for it. But also, Biden is the president of the United States. His words matter.
Every president's word matters. If you want to know, like, one of the biggest reasons that I did not like Trump before he was president and why I definitely don't like him now, it's exactly that. Because being the president does not make you just another guy in a seat. It's a position that we're supposed to look up to. It's a position that we're supposed to show our kids or nieces or nephews and say, you can be that. Look at that person, should be someone that you can look up to. When we were kids, I mean, come on. We had people being like, you can be the president someday, because that was a thing to be proud of. Because the president was a great person, was a person of value, of strength, of leadership. And it doesn't exist now because we have specifically this one individual who came in and destroyed that vision of what being the president means. And we have to bring that back. And Biden's staff is not doing that any favors now, in a time where we're trying to reinstate moral decency to the office.
And it's a shame. It's a shame because Harris has done so well at maintaining dignity around that, and then to be undercut by an 80-something-year-old man in the White House who is really just needs to stay out of the spotlight is immensely frustrating. So,
one last thing I would like to say about this MSG event, and very specifically about Trump and his relationship to these individuals who are speaking for him at his event. He was asked about this. It was either today or yesterday that Trump was asked about the comments that were made about Puerto Rico, which, by the way, was not the only thing that individual said that was horribly racist. He made comments about black people and watermelons and all sorts of other things that were very, very deplorable. But he was asked about this, and he gave a response that I've already hearing people mimic as a defense against him. He goes, well, I don't know who that was. I don't know who he is. Never met him in my life. I don't know who they put in these rallies. I never met him. I don't know.
I don't control the scheduling.
Right. And I want to address that for a brief second, because I'm not going to say that he's wrong or he's right. Like, I don't truly know if he knows or doesn't know these individuals. What I do know is that is the same excuse that Trump has made when asked about every single criminal or shady individual that he has ever been accused of being associated with. He said it.
David
yes,
Duke, the
I was
KKK.
Say David Duke, Lev Parnas. He said it about Ghislaine Maxwell. He said it about Epstein. He said it about all the individuals around him that ended up being either criminals or crazy people. And this is no different. He's using the same exact excuse. I don't know for certain if he knows this person or not, but he spoke at your rally, which means you are responsible for his comments. If there's someone who speaks at Kamala's rally and says something unfortunate, she is responsible for that because it's her rally. Her name's on it, and his name's on this rally. He is still responsible for the things that are said. He cannot say, oh, I don't know them, therefore I should be removed of any consequence from this or any association from this. No, it was your rally, which means even if you didn't literally approve of it, you do approve of it because it's the Trump rally. So we cannot give him that pass. He says the same thing about every single one. We cannot give him the ability to shy away from it by using the same exact excuse that he says about literally everyone he has ever been claimed to have been associated with, either with pictures or other evidence, and him just saying, oh, I don't know, I take lots of pictures with lots of guys. Lev Parnas, Russian what now? I don't know, just some guy to me. No, it's not. And we cannot keep allowing him to just shy away from things with that same tired excuse.
Could not agree more. But let's move on to the bulk argument here. We're going to get into the predictions for what we think is going to happen towards the end here. But I want to start off by giving you the three scenarios, because I think people, they think about, who's going to win the election, but really the question beyond that that is much easier to predict than who's going to win the election is what it is going to look like immediately after the election. So here's the three options of what the next anywhere from 3 to 9 months are going to look like based on how the election turns out, okay? The three things are: Harris wins the White House. That's number one. Number two, Trump wins the White House, but Democrats win the House of Representatives. 3, Trump wins the White House and Republicans control both the House and the Senate. Now, I am not factoring in the Senate into the discussion, to be honest, because the chances of Democrats holding the Senate in any capacity are so slim, just based on the math and based on the situation. And I don't want to go into all the details as to why Democrats are going to lose the United States Senate. They're defending seats in Montana, Ohio, in addition to a whole bunch of the swing states. They don't have the seats, the buffer, I should say, to withstand that. So those are the three options. The first option, if Harris wins, we will all take a giant breath of relief. I say we all. Those of us who are rooting for Kamala Harris, and I suspect many of the people who are listening, will breathe a sigh of relief. But I have to tell you, the next 2 months following that are going to be unlike anything we have ever seen in the history of this country. What I mean by that is this. January 6th was a trial run. It was unorganized. The entire attempt to overturn the election in 2020 was a disorganized mess. It was a failed coup, and it could have been so much worse. In the aftermath of this election, regardless of who is ahead, Donald Trump is going to say that he has won this election. And if Kamala Harris indeed wins this election, they are going to go about every legal process to try and undo the results of this. They are going to try in various states via the state legislatures to submit alternate electors, etc., etc. They're not going to be as successful with this as they might have been had the 2022 midterms gone differently. That is the saving grace. The unfortunate thing is that there is going to be violence. I don't say this because I want this to happen. God forbid. I don't want it to happen. I don't want this to be true. But if you look at the media, that the MAGA cult, and it really is a cult. I'm not saying that everyone who is a supporter of Trump is a member of a cult, but I am talking about a significant portion of people in this country who consume MAGA media. They go specifically looking for that to be their source of news. They watch Steve Bannon, Alex Jones, etc. Those people have been fed something consistently. And a CNN reporter just did 24 hours straight of watching nothing but MAGA media. And the one thing that he said, the one thing he noticed trend consistently is that they say that there is no way that Donald Trump can lose this election without it being stolen from him. That is the message that they are getting told over and over and over again. So if you thought that January 6th in 2020 was bad in the aftermath of the election, imagine how it's going to be now that you have almost 4 full years of that rhetoric about stolen elections and distrust in elections that is going to be spewed and has already seeped into the psyche and the mentality of a significant portion of the electorate. Many of whom are very angry and distrustful in general, many of whom are very well armed. Now, am I saying that they're going to storm the Capitol and burn it down? They may try. The Capitol is not actually the place that I'm the most concerned with because that will be guarded significantly. But state capitals, cities, blue cities, places where they believe that the vote has been altered or changed. Say Wisconsin, if you talk about Milwaukee, you talk about Detroit, you talk about Philadelphia, the cities that potentially, if Arizona was to go blue, in Phoenix, the cities that they view as having stolen their states from them. They are going in there and they're changing the ballots. That's what they're going to believe because that's what they've been told. And so I'm just going to put it to you this way. I live in New Hampshire. I'm not especially concerned for my safety by any stretch of the imagination because in general, New Hampshire is not a place where we have like one giant city that is changing the trajectory of where the state is going to vote. I feel confident the state is going to vote for Kamala Harris, probably in a relatively close but not a nail-biter sort of way. We're talking maybe 5 percentage points. With that being said, I will be taking down my Kamala Harris Walls sign and the magnet on my car immediately after the election, regardless of who wins the election. It will be gone. And that is a safety precaution. That is genuinely how concerned I am about people actively going out and targeting Democrats and targeting people that they view as people who are enabling this sort of liberal socialist takeover that they believe is going on in the deep state.
We are already seeing this happen at least 3 instances now. Across 3 states, we have seen the destruction or attempted destruction of early ballots in ballot boxes, and I believe in Phoenix it was in a post box. In both Portland, Oregon, and in Vancouver, Washington, there was an explosive device that was shoved into a ballot box in both of these states, and evidence that the same car was parked in front of both of them, which led people to believe that there is a coordinated effort, at least in these 2 instances. An incendiary device that was shoved into the ballot box and discharged, made with the attempt of destroying the ballots. Now, we don't know who did it. That meaning we don't know if it was politically motivated. Of course, though being a ballot box, I have a hard time believing it not being politically motivated. Of course, we don't know how this arsonist may have leaned or anything like that. But it is the destruction of ballots that we are seeing already in 2 cities. And in Phoenix, there was somebody who threw an incendiary device into a post box, which did end up destroying some ballots. Now, this person was detained by police, and when questioned, they said that it was not politically motivated. Whether or not that's true, I personally think that it's too close to the election for this sort of behavior to not be politically motivated. But we are at such a contentious time in American history with elections that we are literally seeing an unprecedented destruction of ballots before even election day.
I have to say it, maybe it's an ego thing, whatever. I said this months ago. I predicted all of this, that it would be targeting blue cities and blue areas, and certain people told me that I was crazy. Certain people
I told you were crazy.
Who happened to share a podcast with me told me that I was crazy. And people have been telling me that I was crazy about this for well over a year. People have been telling me since the end of the last election that Trump was going to fade away, that the Republican Party was going to push him out, and I said, no, he's coming back. He's like Jaws. Jaws goes out to sea, he comes back in. I'm sorry. I have to take this moment to be like, this is all very predictable. It just depends on what your news sources are, who you are listening to, and the reality on the ground. What is your bubble? And so it's deeply disturbing to me that there still doesn't seem to be a plan on the left for how we deal with this. There wasn't a plan 4 years ago because for some reason they all just thought that, oh yeah, Trump will just accept the election, which was never going to happen. It was the most easily predictable thing ever, that Trump was never going to leave office quietly, that he was never going to say he lost. And so when I say this stuff, I'm not saying it because I want it to be true. I'm saying it because it is very predictable. And the groundwork has been laid for it, and it's deeply disturbing. And so, yes, it has already begun. The ballot denialism, the election interference, all of that. If Kamala Harris wins this election, as I hope she does, the next 2 months are going to be hell. And that is not her fault, but they are going to be hell. So, that is one scenario. And honestly, that is the preferable scenario. But the second scenario is this. Trump wins the White House, but Democrats retake control of the House of Representatives. This is a very plausible outcome. The next 2 months will not look nearly as horrific as it would be the other way. It's what comes after that will be absolutely horrific and have long-standing results. If Trump wins the White House without full control of Congress, it's a huge deal. It would be a huge deal for Democrats to be able to control the House because they would be able to restrict the Republicans and Trump from enacting their most extreme agenda. That does not mean that it will be a good quality of life and that good things will happen. Trump will almost inevitably appoint younger, crazy conservative justices to the Supreme Court to replace potentially Thomas and Alito, ensuring that he would have a young, hard right conservative Supreme Court for really the duration of our lifetimes. He would also, it certainly sounds like he's going to appoint RFK Jr. in some posts, potentially the head of the National Health Service, which is crazy considering he is a vaccine skeptic. He will potentially appoint Elon Musk to a major government position. If nothing else, Elon Musk will be intricately involved in the federal government, even more so than he already is. All the court cases against him, of course, would be gone immediately. The Department of Justice will go after his political opponents. I strongly believe that Michael Flynn will be the Secretary of Defense because he'll have the votes in the Senate to get it done this time. On top of that, from a foreign policy perspective, you can expect that Israel will be completely uncontrolled in any capacity in how they react and respond to the situation in Gaza. You can also expect that Ukraine will be basically abandoned by the United States under a Trump presidency. So all of that will happen, but in terms of overturning the Affordable Care Act, in terms of changing electoral laws, etc., that potentially would not be possible if the Democrats were to regain control of the House of Representatives. So your House races matter. That is what I'm saying. Like paying attention to winning House races up and down the ticket. Please don't just go in and check off president and then ignore the rest. The House races matter. If you're living in California and you think, oh, well, the presidency, why would I need to vote? House races in Orange County in particular are immensely competitive. There are several districts that we need to hold, several districts we need to win. With that being said, the third option is really devastation. It is a very possible option, is that Donald Trump wins the White House, Republicans regain control of the Senate, and Republicans maintain control of the House of Representatives. And with a unified trifecta of conservative control, here is what will happen, in addition to all of the things that I just said in the last segment. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, said today that Obamacare is on the chopping block. They want to repeal Obamacare once and for all, and they have the conservative votes to do it this time. They did not before. They have them now, and they will have them now and be able to actually do that. In addition, the most disturbing thing that I guarantee you will happen within the first 6 months of a Trump presidency with unified government is an electoral reform law. Republicans in the Senate will abolish the filibuster, and they will pass through a law passed by the House and the Senate, signed by the president, that changes elections in this country forever. When we talk about Jim Crow era sort of restrictions, that is what we're talking about. They will frame it as election defense. We are protecting against what happened in 2020 and electoral misgiving, all of this. What it will be is ensuring that Democrats cannot win elections. It will be ensuring that our elections will run like Russia, which are fraudulent elections. Because that is how autocracies happen. That is how dictators happen. Yes, sometimes they happen with violent coups, but more often than not, they happen at the ballot box. We allow them in. Hitler did not take control via some armed insurrection or armed coup. Hitler took control at the ballot box. It's been true from then up until now throughout the world. Putin wins elections consistently. They're fraudulent, fake elections. They are sham elections.
But how are they going to accomplish this? You know, you talked about this, and I don't disagree with you. I do think that is definitely a very, very distinct possibility and a very scary one. But what's the mechanism they're going to use to ensure this happens? I mean, we already have redistricting, which happens in most cases to the detriment of Democratic areas. to ensure that Republicans can win. But that's already been happening. So what's going to happen differently now?
They're going to use every single window and loophole available to try and make it as difficult as possible for young people to vote, as difficult as possible for people of color to vote. And the biggest concern that I have is that they are going to make it so that state legislatures, which are overwhelmingly conservative even in swing states, state legislatures will have the right to throw out election results. That is the big concern. Yes, maybe we go to the polls and we vote and you elect a Democratic senator in Arizona. Well, no, because there is a state legislature that's controlled by Republicans, those people have oversight over the final results. They can overturn said results. Now, this will be challenged. Inevitably, legally, it will be challenged on a constitutional basis. It'll be taken to the Supreme Court. Well, here's the problem. Supreme Court. There are 5 people on the Supreme Court right now that I do not trust to uphold the constitutional principles of elections. I don't trust them because they haven't. This is a Supreme Court that gave Donald Trump and gave the presidency essentially a full and complete immunity, not even 3-4 months ago. This is a distinct possibility that did not exist in Trump's first term. These are things that did not exist. This is why when people say, how's it going to be any worse? It's going to be a lot worse. There were people in the first Trump administration, people forget that when Donald Trump took the oath of office in January 2017, he was 4 months removed, less than 4 months removed, from his entire party, including the current Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, from abandoning his campaign after the grab him by the pussy thing. He was not on good terms with the Republican Party. He still had to bring in kind of traditional Republican voices into his cabinet. That will not be the expectation. It will be a MAGA government chosen based on who is loyal to him and who will do his bidding for him. That is dangerous for the country. And so that's what we're facing. I hate to be depressing, but that is what we're facing if Donald Trump enters the White House in January with a unified Republican government.
Very bleak thought, but definitely one that has a lot of empirical data behind it. And with that, I think that's a great transition to going into our predictions for the upcoming election on November 2nd. Who we think is going to win and how.
Based on my calculations, and I won't make a final prediction per se until the day of the election. I don't do that until the morning of the election. But if I'm making a call here and we're less than a week out, and I look at the numbers, what I will say is this is a fact. This is not an opinion, this is a fact. Kamala Harris has the worst polling numbers of a Democratic nominee in at least 20 years at this stage in an election. I know that that's not what people hear. That's not what a lot of people in liberal circles are hearing. Look at the numbers. They're not good. And 20 years ago, George W. Bush beat John Kerry in a relatively close election, but it wasn't as close as what it was expected to be. I have to state that because that's influencing my own projection or prediction. I want to be wrong with every fiber of my being, but I do look at the map, and if I had to make a call right now, I say there's about a 55-60% chance maybe that Donald Trump is elected president. And I have been taking heat for my belief that Trump can win and maybe is the most likely to win now from people on the left. I don't want this to be true. That's the thing. People come at me about this and they act like it's somehow something that I want. Like we have forgotten that you can be objective about something and look at how something might happen and admit that it might not go the way you want it to go. But I think that Kamala is going to win Michigan. I think she's going to eke out a win in Nevada personally. That's just a guess. But honestly, Nevada's an irrelevant state. When you add up the electoral counts, Nevada doesn't matter in most of the scenarios. It's only 6 electoral votes. It could make a difference, but it's not likely to be the deciding factor. Michigan is an important state, and I think she's going to eke out a win in Michigan. I don't think she's going to win in Arizona. It's possible. I don't think she's going to win in Georgia. It's possible. She probably has a better chance in North Carolina of winning than either of those 2 other states I just mentioned, which is odd. But until North Carolina goes blue, I don't believe it. It didn't go blue for Hillary, obviously. It didn't go blue for Biden. Senate races, they keep losing. Like, they keep coming up short. It's a close state, but until otherwise, I look at the polling and I still don't see North Carolina being a blue state in this election. I hope I'm wrong. But if that is the case, then the election really comes down to Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And my heart tells me that those states are going to go for Kamala Harris. But looking at the numbers, I am very skeptical. And I'm concerned that Wisconsin, I think she has a better likelihood of winning, but only slightly. Pennsylvania, which 4 years ago I felt was an even more comfortable state than Michigan or Wisconsin. Pennsylvania is a complicated state, and the gender gap is not nearly as wide there as it is in the other states. If you look at the numbers, in terms of men versus women, it's not nearly as wide. It's an interesting state. But right now, Trump has the lead in the averages, considering what I've said about polling in the past, that it tends to underestimate Trump support, especially people that only vote for Trump. I currently have that in the red in my projections. So what that would lead to is a electoral map in which Donald Trump has 291 electoral votes and Kamala Harris has 247, which would lead to Donald Trump being the next president of the United States. I hope to God I'm wrong, but that's what I'm looking at right now. In terms of the House, I do believe the most likely scenario is that Democrats will retake the House. And the reason for that is because the races that they need to win are not in these swing states per se. Some of them are, but a lot of them are states like New York, California. They are in places where those seats are winnable, and it's such a tight break between Democrats and Republicans right now in the House that I do think that they can win back the House. It would be narrow, but I do think they can win back the House. If that is true, that would be the one saving grace in an otherwise really devastating moment in American history. That's where I'm at the moment. I wish that I had better prediction. What do you got for me, Tyler? Hopefully it's brighter than mine.
It's not.
Oh, God.
Empirically speaking, Trump has a narrow victory in view. I think it's going to speak it out as the polling currently stands. And if we're going to believe the polling and trust it as we have, he'll win. And I think the data points to that. But instead of just repeating what you're saying, I want to focus on something else. I want to focus on the opportunity that Kamala has to upset this possibility. Because I do think that there's an avenue for victory for Harris. And I want to focus my prediction on what this avenue will be should she win. When you go back to 2016, we saw an unprecedented number of Trump voters come out to vote for him. It was that one time where the polls were actually wrong in a lot of key areas, because the polls didn't account for those individuals who saw Trump and was like, that's the person I'm going to support, who previously didn't participate in polls. And I think there is an opportunity. This might happen again on the flip side. I don't think it's the super likely, but I do think that of all the times in recent political history, this might be the time where we get that flipped. From what I've seen, there are three key demographics in which Harris has a very significant lead. One is obviously women. She is leading in women. She has been leading in women forever. The campaign is using this in their ads. And she's also leading in young voters, Gen Z voters. And I do believe that she has the lead in first-time voters. When you look at new voters nationally in 2024, 79% of them are under 35. Baby millennials and everything younger. When you break down the voter registration in 2024 specifically, that's 37,000 new registered voters in Pennsylvania. It's 28,000 in North Carolina. It's 21,000 in Michigan. It's 43,000 in Georgia, 18K in Arizona, 19,000 in Wisconsin. Are these numbers that will absolutely flip everything on its head? It can, but it's unlikely because it's obviously all of these people are not going to vote for one candidate. There's going to be some split. But if she were to win, it would be because of these demographics.
I would agree, and I hope that is true. The challenge is Politics is changing. We're having a realignment in terms of political allegiance, and it's on gender, it's certainly economic status, but it's also really about college degrees. The thing that is concerning on my end is just, yes, Gen Z, if they vote, of course, we want them to vote, we want them to come out, but they are more conservative than previous young generations, especially men. Gen Z men, we're looking at the numbers, I said this months ago, and it has borne out that Gen Z men are moving towards Trump. And it's not to say that it's a majority. It is to say that it is a smaller majority in favor of Democrats with men by a significant margin than previous generations. And so what we really are seeing a shift in men in general moving towards Republican candidates. We're seeing that certainly in minority communities as well. That's the change, and that's going to be kind of the thing that we're throwing up in the air. So we don't know what those numbers are going to look like, and we don't know what those margins are going to look like. And so no one knows. But right now, of course, I'm going with what I have. We're just taking guesses based on what we have. Both of us hope that we're wrong. The thing is, it's not decided yet, and Kamala Harris very easily could win this election. Don't lose hope, but be prepared. Be prepared for either reality. That's all we want, is to give you guys the most up-to-date information about what could happen in terms of the election. With that, we should move into a slightly happier segment. Maybe. I don't know. You seem a little angry at the moment, but I'll start off, and I'm going to go quicker. If there's anything that I have taken out of the last few months, it is that elections do not need to go on for as long as they go on in this country. It's exhausting. We're all so tired. I love elections. Now, I don't especially love this one because it's giving me too much anxiety. But I have always loved elections and electoral politics, but it has gone on way too long. And so primaries need to start later in this country. I think we can all agree on this. I think we've seen with Kamala Harris ascending to the Democratic nomination that we can do this in a short period of time, and it doesn't change anything. And so we don't need to start the primaries in January and start the debates 15, 16 months before the election itself. Why can we not have all the primaries on the same day like we do the election? That way the candidates would be campaigning across the entirety of the country, not just a few select states at a time. Or, for that matter, if you want to have it in a few select states at a time, have it start in the spring at least. We don't need the amount of time that we currently have. Electoral exhaustion, electoral fatigue is real, and quite frankly, it beats people down and discourages people from being involved. And that's including people who are actively enjoy being involved in electoral politics. It beats us down. And so I think we can all agree, and should be able to agree, that we should ask our leaders, assuming we continue to have fair elections after this one, please, let's think about changing the way we do this going forward.
I absolutely love that idea. So I'll keep mine a little brief here. It is definitely in no way politically related, and I'm sure our listeners are probably grateful for that. And so here's my hot take. When you RSVP to something, commit to it. RSVPs matter. When you commit to going to an event, a party, or really any other sort of gathering in which somebody has to account for the number of people, it could be a wedding, a quinceañera, or whatever. If you say you're going to come and you RSVP to it, that changes a lot of what the host has to do to account for you. And it's a lot of work that goes into ensuring that you as a guest are fed and satiated. If you come into that event a week, a month, a number of months before the event happens, don't no-show. Don't be that guy that just doesn't show up to an RSVP'd event because something came up, but you're too lazy to call the host and let them know that plans changed. Because all it does is make yourself look bad. Come on, commit to your engagements.
I am sensing that this is personal to you. I have to say, you're in the wrong place to be making that argument in Los Angeles, man. Look, I love LA, don't get me wrong, I love it, lived there for years, but in terms of people showing up to things that they say they're going to show up to, or what time they show up, you know as well as I do, LA is one of the worst places for that. I know this was a longer episode for our listeners here, so thank you all for bearing with us, for listening to our takes. I hope it was insightful for you, and I just want to say, I don't want y'all to lose hope right now if you're listening to this, because there is hope. And we are going to continue to fight and push back against extremism. There is going to be resistance regardless of what happens. There's going to be resistance to the forces that would try to upend our democratic process. And just remember again that civility is going to be critical in the next couple of months regardless. If your candidate wins, do not rub it in the faces of the people who lost. And if you lose, again, don't actively go after the people who you disagree with, because that is not productive. That won't be productive for what we want, which is to bring the country back from the brink of where it currently stands. Don't scapegoat. There will be plenty of discussions after this election about why the results were the results. And we can have those discussions in a civil way while we deal with the results and the issues that are going to present themselves one way or the other. Be the agent of change and civility and decency as we deal with this, because we need that. We don't need more people screaming in the streets and yelling angrily and going on social media and trashing everyone. We don't need that. All you're doing is pushing the people that disagree with you further away. Please, by all means, try and bring people in. And between now and Election Day, you have to go and make sure that the people closest to you go to the polls. I don't care where you live. If you feel like your vote does not matter, you are wrong. If you feel like you don't like either candidate, that's fine, but you need to vote. Do not let your voice be silenced or ignored. Do not stay on the sidelines when we are facing a crucial turning point in American history. Your voice needs to be involved in the decision that we are about to make, not just about the presidency, but about Congress, about your local representatives, about ballot initiatives, up and down the ticket. You need to be making your voice heard. So please, make a plan, go out there, make sure that you are at the polls, that you send in your ballots, whatever you need to do, make sure that your ballot has been received, and let's go hold on to that hope and try and save the country from tearing itself apart. Because that's really, regardless of the politics of it, we have to save the country from tearing itself apart. We have to stop the hate. That's what we got for you. From Manchester, New Hampshire, I am Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And this has been Reunited States.